The gleaming spires of the Galactic Military Academy pierced the purple-tinged atmosphere of Centauri Prime like crystalline needles reaching for the stars. Kai Torres stood at the viewing port of the transport ship, trying to mask their amazement. After 20 years of humans being relegated to the fringes of galactic society, this was their chance to prove humanity's worth. The transport's hull thrummed with a deep resonance as it passed through the Academy's quantum shields. Kai's fellow human cadets, all 12 of them, pressed against the viewports, their expressions a mixture of awe and apprehension. They were the first human class ever admitted to the Academy, a gesture of goodwill that everyone knew was really a test. Atmospheric pressure equalizing, announced the ship's AI in 15 different languages. Please prepare for docking procedures. Kai adjusted their worn cadet uniform, the only one they could afford from the underground cities of New Terra. Unlike the other human cadets who came from Earth's recovered surface cities, Kai had clawed their way up from the depths where humanity had hidden during the dark years. The scholarship to the Academy had been their ticket out. The docking bay was a cathedral of advanced technology, making Earth's most sophisticated spaceports look like primitive launching pads. Hundreds of alien cadets from across the galaxy were disembarking their own vessels, some floating, others crawling, a few seemingly phasing through solid matter. "Humans, please proceed to Orientation Hull Delta," a melodious voice echoed. "Follow the blue quantum path." A shimmering blue line appeared on the floor. As they walked, Kai noticed the other species giving them a wide berth, some making what had to be disgusted gestures with their various appendages. A group of Thanarians, proud warriors with their characteristic iridescent scales and biomechanical augmentations, openly sneered as the humans passed. "Look," one rumbled in heavily accented standard. "The primitives can follow basic instructions." Kai kept walking, but catalogued everything, the way the Thanarians moved, how their scales shifted with their emotions, the slight delay in their augmented reflexes. Information was survival. The orientation hall was a vast amphitheater designed to accommodate beings of all sizes and environmental needs. The humans were assigned seats in the lowest tier, traditionally reserved for developing species. Above them, the established races lounged in climate-controlled comfort pods. Supreme Commander Draketh, a legendary Thanarian warrior who had led the Galactic Defense Force for 3 centuries, materialized on the central platform. His scales gleamed with accomplishment markings, and his augmentations hummed with barely contained power. "Welcome, new cadets, to the most elite military training institution in known space," his voice resonated through neural translators. "Some of you come from civilizations that have shaped the galaxy for millennia. Others," his gaze swept over the human section, "are taking their first steps beyond their cradle worlds." Kai noticed how he emphasized the difference, the subtle way he reinforced the hierarchy. Classic dominance behavior, not so different from the gang leaders in New Terra's underground. "Over the next 3 years, most of you will fail," Draketh continued. "This is not just training, it is a forge where we separate the worthy from the weak. Those who graduate will join the ranks of the Galactic Defense Force, protectors of civilized space." A holographic display materialized, showing combat scenarios, tactical simulations, and technical challenges that made Earth's most advanced military training look like a children's game. Kai's fingers twitched, already analyzing, adapting, planning. "Your first evaluation begins immediately," Draketh announced. "Proceed to your assigned training chambers. Show us what your species is truly capable of." As the cadets filed out, Kai heard whispers in a dozen alien languages, all saying variations of the same thing: the humans wouldn't last a week. Kai allowed themselves a small smile. They had survived 16 years in the tunnels beneath New Terra, breathing recycled air and fighting for every scrap of food. The Academy might be the most elite training facility in the galaxy, but it had never encountered human persistence before. In the underground, they had a saying: "Pressure either crushes you or turns you to diamond." Time to show the galaxy which one humans would become. The training chamber resembled a blank canvas of metallic walls that could transform into any combat scenario imaginable. Kai stood with the other first-year cadets, watching as Squadron Leader Vex-Ra, a being of pure energy contained within an advanced environmental suit, explained the evaluation protocols. Each of you will face a standardized combat simulation. Vex-Ra's voice crackled with artificial static. Your performance will determine your initial ranking and training group assignment. The first few cadets demonstrated the gulf between Earth's military capabilities and galactic standards. A meridian crystal being shattered and reformed to avoid attacks. A quantum collective representative split into multiple instances to overwhelm their opponents. The Thanarian war prince, Nexus, literally bent gravity around himself. Kai analyzed each performance, noting not just the strengths but the subtle weaknesses. The Meridians reforming had a 3-second vulnerability window. The quantum collective couldn't maintain splits under certain energy frequencies. Nexus's gravity manipulation left trace signatures before activation. Human Cadet Torres, Vex-Ra announced. You're next. Whispers rippled through the chamber. Most alien cadets hadn't even bothered learning the humans' names, assuming they'd wash out quickly. Nexus's scales flickered with amusement as Kai stepped into the simulation zone. Beginning simulation, Urban Combat Scenario Delta, the chamber's AI announced. The blank walls shimmered and transformed into a ruined cityscape, eerily similar to the underground ruins of New Terra. 3 combat drones materialized, each equipped with different weapon loadouts. Standard protocol was to engage them directly, demonstrating combat prowess. But Kai had grown up learning that direct confrontation was often the fastest way to die. The first drone charged, plasma cannons charging. Instead of dodging, Kai sprinted straight toward it, sliding underneath at the last second. The drone's targeting systems, calibrated for standard combat distances, couldn't adjust fast enough. Kai's hand found the emergency shutdown port, standard issue on all Academy training equipment, but rarely used in evaluations. Drone 1, deactivated, the AI announced, surprise somehow evident in its artificial voice. The remaining drones adjusted their attack patterns, trying to pin Kai down with crossfire. But the ruins provided perfect cover, reminiscent of the countless gang skirmishes in New Terra's lower levels. Kai used the environment to their advantage, causing one drone to damage the other with friendly fire before exploiting another shutdown port. The final drone switched to close combat protocols, extending monomolecular blades. This was where most candidates showed off their hand-to-hand combat skills. Instead, Kai grabbed debris from the simulated environment, throwing it through the drone's sensor array before finishing it off. The simulation ended. Silence filled the chamber. Unorthodox tactics, Vex-Ra noted, energy patterns swirling with what might have been interest. Explain your strategy, Cadet Torres. Why fight harder when you can fight smarter? Kai replied. Every system has vulnerabilities. Finding them is usually safer than testing your strength against superior forces. Nexus stepped forward, his augmented eyes gleaming. You mean safer for cowards. Real warriors don't seek shortcuts. Real warriors survive, Kai countered. And help others survive too. Isn't that the point of the Galactic Defense Force? The comment struck a nerve. Nexus's scales rippled with barely contained rage. You dare lecture me about warrior ethics? My bloodline has defended this galaxy since your species was learning to make fire. And yet here we are, Kai said quietly, training together. Before Nexus could respond, Supreme Commander Drakatha's hologram appeared in the chamber. Fascinating approach, Cadet Torres. Though some might question whether such tactics belong in our academy. Permission to speak freely, Commander. Drakatha's hologram flickered with amusement. Granted. The Academy's mission is to train effective defenders of galactic peace, Kai said. Not to preserve traditional combat methods just because they're traditional. Humans had to adapt to survive the dark years on Earth. We learned that victory doesn't always look like what you expect. You sound very sure of your species' methods, Drakath observed. I'm sure that different perspectives make any force stronger, Kai replied. Even if those perspectives come from a primitive species. The chamber fell silent again. Challenging authority wasn't just discouraged at the academy, it was practically unheard of. But Kai knew that respect in the underground was earned through both strength and wisdom. Why should the galaxy be any different? Very well, Drakatha's hologram grew larger. Let's test your theory. 2 weeks from now, you will face me in a formal evaluation. Show us if human adaptability can match 3 centuries of Thanarian combat experience. The hologram vanished, leaving the chamber in chaos. Humans didn't just skip ranks to face supreme commanders. It wasn't done. It wasn't possible. But as Kai caught Nexus's furious glare, they remembered another underground saying, impossible is just the universe's way of asking, how badly do you want it? Pretty badly, as it turned out. Pretty badly indeed. The Academy's archives were supposedly infinite, extending into quantum storage realms that human science was only beginning to understand. Kai sat surrounded by holographic displays, studying every piece of combat footage featuring Thanarian warriors they could access. You're going to die, you know that, right? Kai looked up to find Xena, a Neuraxian cadet with translucent skin that revealed her shifting neural patterns, floating nearby. Unlike most non-human cadets, she'd actually started talking to Kai after the simulation incident. Your confidence is overwhelming, Kai replied, gesturing to the footage. Look at this. Every Thanarian combat style has patterns. Even their augmentations follow predictable protocols. Xena's neural patterns pulsed with concern. Drakath has been fighting longer than your entire civilization has had spaceflight. He's not just any Thanarian. Which means he's had longer to become set in his ways. Kai highlighted a sequence showing a Thanarian warrior's augmentation ports. Their biomechanical systems need microseconds to sync with neural commands. That's an opening. An opening that lasts less than a human heartbeat. Sometimes less than a heartbeat is all you need. The archive's AI interrupted their discussion. Cadet Torres, your presence is requested in Training Chamber Alpha. Kai found Vexare waiting in the chamber, her energy form swirling with unusual patterns. Your challenge has created quite a stir, Cadet. Several faculty members believe allowing it would undermine Academy traditions. And what do you believe, Squadron Leader? Vexare's energy patterns shifted to what Kai had learned was amusement. I believe traditions that cannot withstand challenge were never strong enough to begin with. She activated the chamber's systems. Now, show me what you've learned about Thanarian combat. For the next 2 hours, Vexare ran Kai through increasingly difficult simulations. Each one featured aspects of Thanarian warfare, from their gravity manipulation to their neural augmented reaction times. Kai failed. Repeatedly. But each failure revealed something new. Your approach is unusual, Vexare noted as Kai picked themselves up after a particularly brutal simulation. Most candidates try to match strength with strength. That's because most candidates come from species that can, Kai wiped blood from their lip. Humans had to learn different ways to survive. We're good at it. Perhaps too good, a new voice interrupted. Nexus stood at the chamber's entrance, his scales shimmering with barely contained rage. Your challenge disrespects everything the Academy stands for. The Academy stands for defense of the galaxy, Kai countered. Not just one way of achieving it. You speak of defense. Nexus advanced, his augmented eyes glowing. Your species nearly destroyed itself in the dark years. You hide in underground cities because you couldn't protect your own world. And now you dare to suggest your methods belong here. We survived, Kai stood their ground. We adapted. We're still here. Maybe that's worth learning from. Then learn from this. Nexus moved faster than any training simulation, his augmented fist connecting with Kai's ribs before they could react. The impact sent them sliding across the chamber floor. Cadet Nexus. Vexaray's energy form flared. This is unauthorized combat. But Kai was already moving, ignoring the pain. In the underground, every fight was unauthorized. Every attack could be fatal. You learned to think through the pain or you didn't survive to think at all. Nexus pressed his advantage, his augmentations humming with power. But Kai had spent weeks studying Thanarian combat patterns. Each attack was textbook perfect, and therefore predictable. They slipped past Nexus's guard, targeting the neural sync ports they'd identified in the archives. A precise strike disrupted the augmentation's rhythm for just a fraction of a second. But in that fraction, the mighty Thanarian warrior stumbled. Enough. Supreme Commander Drakatha's voice filled the chamber. His actual form, not a hologram, stood watching. How long had he been there? Commander, Nexus straightened immediately. I was merely merely proving Cadet Torres's point about adaptation versus tradition, Drakath interrupted. His scales shifted in complex patterns. Very enlightening. He turned to Kai, who was trying not to show how much their ribs hurt. Your challenge proceeds tomorrow at dawn. The entire academy will observe. His augmented eyes narrowed. I trust you'll make it educational for everyone. After he left, Xena helped Kai to the medical bay. Still feeling confident about tomorrow? Kai managed a smile despite the pain. Actually, yes. Nexus just helped me confirm something important. What's that? Even the strongest warrior can be beaten. Kai closed their eyes as the medical scanners began their work. If you're willing to risk everything to prove a point. In the medical bay's window, the academy's artificial sun began to set, casting long shadows across the training grounds. Tomorrow, those grounds would either see the beginning of a new era in galactic defense, or the end of humanity's hopes for true acceptance among the stars. Kai intended to make sure it was the former. Dawn on Centauri Prime painted the Academy's combat arena in shades of amber and gold. The entire facility had been transformed overnight, with quantum viewing platforms allowing thousands of spectators to witness the challenge from every angle. Representatives from 50 different species filled the stands, their varied forms creating a living tapestry of galactic civilization. Kai stood in the preparation chamber, focusing on their breathing just as they had before every life-or-death situation in New Terra's underground. The medical nanites had worked through the night to repair their ribs, but phantom pain lingered, a reminder of yesterday's lesson. Final medical scan complete, the AI announced. Cadet Torres cleared for combat. Xena floated into the chamber, her neural patterns churning with anxiety. The betting pools are outrageous. 10,000 to 1 against you. Good thing I'm not a gambling person. Kai checked their basic combat suit one last time. Unlike their opponent's advanced armor, it offered minimal protection. But it also had fewer vulnerabilities. The whole galaxy is watching, Xena's form pulsed. Whatever happens today will be remembered. Then let's give them something worth remembering. The arena's force fields hummed to life as Kai walked out. The viewing platforms floated like luminous clouds, each one packed with spectators. Even the normally stoic quantum collectives seemed to vibrate with anticipation. Supreme Commander Drakath stood at the arena's center, his combat armor gleaming. Enhanced muscle fibers visibly shifted beneath his scales, and his augmentation ports glowed with barely contained power. This wasn't just a warrior, this was a living weapon, perfected over centuries. The terms are simple, announced Dean Vexaray, her energy form expanded to be visible to all. Victory by submission, incapacitation, or ring out. Lethal force is prohibited, but all other tactics are permitted. Drakatha's scales shifted in what Kai had learned was amusement. Any last words, human? Just a question. Kai settled into a relaxed stance. Why did you really accept this challenge? Perhaps I wish to remind everyone why traditions endure. Drakatha's augmented eyes pulsed. Or perhaps I simply enjoy teaching memorable lessons. The signal tone resonated through the arena. Drakath moved with impossible speed, his augmented form becoming a blur. But Kai was already moving too, not away, but toward the attack. It was the last thing any trained warrior would expect, and for a crucial moment, it disrupted Drakath's perfect form. Kai slipped past his guard, targeting the neural sync ports they'd studied so carefully. But Drakath was nothing like Nexus. His counter was instantaneous, a gravity pulse that sent Kai flying across the arena. Impressive, Drakath acknowledged as Kai rolled to their feet. You've studied our weaknesses well. But knowledge alone isn't enough. The next exchange was brutal. Drakath's centuries of experience showed in every move, each attack flowing into the next like a deadly dance. Kai weathered the storm, using every trick learned in the underground. When strength failed, they used speed. When speed wasn't enough, they used misdirection. You fight like a scavenger, Drakath observed, his attacks never ceasing. No honor, no proper form. We fought to survive. Kai ducked under a strike that would have ended the match. Honor doesn't mean much when your species is facing extinction. Something changed in Drakath's expression. His next attack was different, not just powerful, but precise in a way that spoke of personal experience. You think humans are the only ones who faced extinction? Understanding flickered through Kai's mind as they barely avoided a crushing blow. The history archives had mentioned something about the Thanarians' own dark age, centuries ago. A time when their civilization had nearly collapsed. Your people survived by becoming stronger, Kai said, spotting a pattern in Drakath's augmentation cycling. We survived by becoming smarter. And you believe that makes you worthy of standing among us? I believe it makes us different. And different isn't always wrong. The commander's next attack was a masterpiece of Thanarian combat arts, combining strength, gravity manipulation, and augmented speed. But Kai had been counting the microsecond delays between his neural commands and augmentation responses. In the infinitesimal gap between thought and action, they struck. A precise hit disrupted Drakath's augmentation cycle. A second strike targeted a pressure point beneath his scales. The third, learned from studying underwater combat recordings, created a resonance frequency that momentarily confused his balance organs. For less than a heartbeat, the Supreme Commander of the Galactic Defense Force stumbled. In that moment, Kai could have ended the match. A throw, a submission hold, even a simple push would have secured victory. Instead, they stepped back and bowed, a warrior's acknowledgement. The arena fell silent as Drakath regained his balance. His augmented eyes studied Kai with an intensity that seemed to pierce through flesh and bone. You could have won, he said quietly. Winning wasn't the point, Kai straightened from their bow. Proving humanity belongs here was. Drakath's scales shifted through colors that the archives hadn't documented. Then, to the astonishment of everyone watching, he laughed, a deep, resonant sound that filled the arena. Perhaps, he said finally, we have all grown too comfortable in our traditions. News of the challenge spread across the galaxy faster than quantum communications could carry it. Within days, the recording had been viewed on thousands of worlds, sparking fierce debates in every corner of civilized space. The Academy's halls buzzed with changed energy, the traditional hierarchies suddenly seemed less rigid, less certain. Kai sat in the Academy's meditation garden, watching the artificial star set. Their combat suit had been retired to the Academy's museum, alongside a detailed analysis of human adaptive combat techniques. The irony wasn't lost on them. Your actions have created quite a disturbance, Drakath's voice came from behind. The Supreme Commander had shed his combat armor for traditional Thanarian robes. The Galactic Council is divided on what it means for future military doctrine. Change usually creates disturbance, Kai didn't rise. In the past week, they'd earned the right to speak as equals. That doesn't make it wrong. No, Drakath settled beside them, his augmentations humming quietly. But it does make it dangerous. Some species are calling for accelerated human integration into the defense force. Others warn that your methods could destabilize millennia of military tradition. And what do you think? Drakatha's scales shifted thoughtfully. I think I had forgotten something important. Before we Thanarians developed our augmentations, before we became the warriors we are today, we were also adapters. We survived because we changed. A group of first-year cadets passed by, including both humans and Thanarians. Unlike before, they walked together, discussing combat techniques from both traditions. The betting pools have shifted. Xena appeared, her neural patterns dancing with excitement. Odds on humans completing the academy training have dropped to even money. The galaxy is changing, Drakath observed. Perhaps it needs to. It already was. Kai watched the mixed group of cadets. We just helped it realize that. The days that followed brought more changes. The Academy's training programs were revised to include adaptive combat techniques alongside traditional forms. Species that had long been considered too primitive for admission were re-evaluated. Even the Thanarians began experimenting with less augmentation-dependent fighting styles. 1 month after the challenge, Kai stood before a new class of human cadets, twice as many as the first group. Their eyes held the same mix of hope and determination that Kai had felt what seemed like a lifetime ago. The galaxy expects us to prove ourselves, Kai told them. They're waiting to see if what happened in that arena was a fluke or the beginning of something new. But they're missing the point. We're not here to prove ourselves to them.